Hola a todos, gracias por estar aquí. Como saben, si tienen preguntas, pues me pueden dejar saber utilizando la aplicación del chat. Me dejan saber por ahí y entonces lo seleccionamos. Thank you very much for being here today. You already know the drill. If you have questions, please use the chat. Let me know if you have questions, please. Thank you. So let's do it.
And then we'll choose you.
Oscar Serrano. Everyone has to go on mute that's not speaking, and Oscar, we can't hear you if you are speaking. Oscar Serrano.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good morning and happy holidays to everyone. I just have a question that
Thank you.
maybe if you can help me keep track regarding the appointments. Could you clarify the appointments that have been made through which of the mechanisms of the law have they come in, and the ones that are the positions that are vacant, to which mechanisms of the law do they belong? I'm referring to presidential appointments, congressional appointments, majority, minority, etc.
Sure.
Just to keep track.
Sure. David, do you want to do this or would you like me to?
I'll start and then you can correct me, Natalie. It's thanks, Oscar. It's easier to go backwards from the ones that are open, at least for me. There's one seat that's open. That is the House Majority Leader nomination. So it's Nancy Pelosi nominating, President appointing. I am in holdover status, and so my slot, which is a Mitch McConnell, a Senate Majority Leader nomination, President appointment, is currently filled, but I can either be replaced or reappointed. Of the new appointees, Betty Rosa was nominated by, now I'm Natalie
Schumer.
So she's a Schumer, so it'd be a Senate Minority Leader nomination, President appointment. John Nixon is he could say it, but I'll say it, is a House Minority Leader nomination. So it was a Kevin McCarthy nomination, President appointment. Justin Peterson was the presidential appointment, the one that the president just gets to appoint on his own. So I think, is that everybody, Oscar, that you're?
So Oscar, if you go through the law in section 101E, the category A appointment, which is Nancy Pelosi's, category A appointment, which is a resident Puerto Rican, is Mr. Medina. His appointment is intention to appoint has been announced, but he has not yet been appointed. Category B in the law is also the House Speaker's appointment, and it is an empty position, as the chairman said. Category C is the Majority Leader of the Senate, and that is is the position that Andrew Biggs is in, and the White House has announced the intent to appoint. And it is the position that Professor Skeel is in. Category D is the Minority Leader of the House, McCarthy, and that is Mr. Nixon. Category E is the Minority Leader of the Senate, Chuck Schumer, and that is Betty Rosa. And category F is selected in the president's sole discretion, and that is Justin Peterson. So just as David said, but I'm just trying to give you, from the law, kind of how it flows.
Thank you, I got it. And the reason Mr. Medina was not in today's meeting is because we only have an intention for him and not an actual appointment yet.
That's correct.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Okay, Sadot Santana, Metro Newspaper. Go ahead.
Yes. Hi to all. Holidays to all.
too. My first question will be to Mr. Skeel. Given that concerning Judge Swain deadline for the plan of adjustment, do you expect the presentation of that plan before February 10? You have the board has like a month or so for that presentation, and how are those negotiations going at the time?
I didn't hear the very end of the question because the internet cut out a little bit, but I think I can answer the question. As you noted, Judge Swain set a February 10 date for us either to propose a formal plan of adjustment or at the very least to file with the court a term sheet that has the terms of a potential plan of adjustment. I absolutely expect us to meet that deadline. As Natalie mentioned during the meeting, we're in mediation right now. We had a proposed plan earlier this year in February that was on track. We thought it got derailed or at least got slowed down by the pandemic. We are in negotiations now. I absolutely expect us to meet the judge's deadline. So on or before February 10th, I expect us to hopefully be filing a plan, but at the very least to be filing a term sheet.
My second and final question would be to Mr. Peterson. Mr. Peterson, you highlighted in the other two meetings the need for good faith negotiations. Have you seen that on this mediation process at the time?
I don't think Mr. Peterson's here, but I also just have to say that we're not allowed to comment on mediation. Mediation requires strict confidentiality as part of the process. So we're really not going to be able to comment on the process, other than to tell you that we continue to be hopeful and intent on exiting bankruptcy.
Alex Fernandez, Cyber News, has a question. Alex?
Por el chat yo la puse, Edward.
Oh, okay, you want to move? I'll read it okay, I'll read it. In terms of the petition of giving more space to the new government, in what areas you think you can give more room to the elected government, and also how the new members foresee themselves in terms of guiding Puerto Rico out of the board?
Sounds like a question maybe for John. If I'm not sure if Betty is on. I mean, I'll go ahead, John, if you have a comment.
I mean, no, that's a good point. I mean, as far as the new, the more room for the government, I think that's just I'm not exactly sure. That's something I've got to come up to speed on as far as the law and as far as what we're required to do. I know that the law is pretty prescriptive as to what we can and can't do as a board and what we have to do, part of our financial oversight obligations and requirements. As far as helping lead Puerto Rico out of the board, clearly that's a goal of all of ours, right? I mean, I'm not intending to be on this board forever, and clearly we want to turn the reins fully back to the elected officials there in Puerto Rico would be my goal. I think, though, what we need to do is we need to bring in not only a structured fiscal responsibility within government, we need to make sure that we have structurally balanced fiscal plans that are in place, long-term fiscal plans that the Commonwealth can afford. It's going to be a pretty big balancing act. I have had experience going into Michigan with perpetual structural deficits, reform some of the long-term liabilities there, and was a little, involved with the Detroit bankruptcy as well. So there is a model for success, but everybody's got to roll up their sleeves and dig in. I look forward to coming up to speed over the next several days. I've got several briefing sessions coming up, and my intention is to bring all of my experience and expertise in a very cooperative way to help resolve these challenging issues. I mean, they're not easy answers, or they would have been done. But my goal is to have this be done, have it be done correctly, and help get Puerto Rico on a path to economic recovery and long-term sustainability. That's the key, right? I mean, you can balance the budget, you can do a lot of things, but unless there's the economic revitalization in the Commonwealth, this is going to be an ongoing problem. So I think that that's something we've got to focus on as a board as well.
I'll kind of repeat the question, or try to. Betty, I see, has joined us. You didn't hear the question, so it's not fair to ask you to answer it. But the question was along the lines of, where do we see opportunities for more collaboration with the democratically elected leaders of Puerto Rico, and what vision do the new members have going forward? How do you see your role? I think that's more or less the question.
Well, I'm going to start with, I just heard John talk about the economic recovery and some of the key issues that we have to grapple with to support Puerto Rico in really building, as I earlier stated, that capacity to really become economically, I would say, not only on the right path, but really flourishing, and so that the people of the island really benefit from the various actions and infusion of not only financial, but also looking at building that capacity. I would say, I think in the new administration, I can tell you that I think part of it, and I'm going to speak from the educational perspective, obviously, I'm a member of the council, which has had meetings with the transition team in education, but there's also opportunities to have conversations with various legislators that are really committed to Puerto Rico, and knowing that the island has gone through various devastations, and the current newly elect, I know sees the opportunity to support the island, to support the people of Puerto Rico in becoming economically self-sufficient. So I truly am committed, as I spoke to Natalie, to the educational aspect, as somebody who looks at the state, not only from everything from K-12, higher education professions. We've had to deal with also the whole issue of looking at health, our Department of Health, and collaborations in those areas in our reopening plans. I really hope that the lessons learned from our aspect of it, and lessons learned in terms of the specific issues of Puerto Rico, that we can collaborate as well and share some of those learning opportunities. I'm excited about this from not only from the financial part of it, I'm excited about it also from the educational investment aspect of it.
Now, I'll just add generally to those comments by Betty and John that it seems to me that we have a really nice combination right now on the board with this rapidly filling new board of continuity from the work that the board has done in the last 4 years, or a nice combination of continuity and fresh perspective. So we have 2 members on the board now who were among the original 7. Natalie has been our CEO, our executive director on the board for almost the entire time. We have a staff who have been with us for much of the last 4 years. And at the same time, we have Justin and Betty and John, and hopefully we'll soon have Antonio, who will bring a fresh perspective to these issues. And so I think the board is very well positioned to make a difference in 2021.
Okay, Jose Alvarado, Caribbean Business.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to know if the board has any concerns. Let's say that the agreements that you reach the bond agreements, but many of these agreements, they're measures that the Legislative Assembly of Puerto Rico must approve in order to viabilize some of these agreements. And right now, the Legislative Assembly of Puerto Rico is divided between the opposition. You have opposition parties that were not there before, including earlier this year, when the RSA, the PREPA RSA was presented. There was a lot of opposition, even from the majority NPP. So even if, let's say, Pierluisi gets on board with these with the agreements, how would you deal with the opposition from many of the parties in the legislature, which are hostile to not only the agreements but to the board itself?
I can start out by giving an answer to that. Maybe Natalie will want to add to it. And what I would say is, anytime you have multiple decision makers in a process, there's a possibility that there'll be disagreement, and you have to work through the different perspectives to reach the outcome you're trying to reach. But we are confident that we all have the same objective. Puerto Rico the Commonwealth has been in bankruptcy for almost 4 years. It's time for the Commonwealth to get out of bankruptcy and to move on. And I think everybody agrees with that. So I am hopeful that we can reach agreements with the creditors and the other interested parties that will be as consensual as possible, that will have as much support as possible, and that all of the affected parties, all of the parties with the say, including the governor and the legislature, will agree. Natalie.
I'll just add that the other thing I think everyone agrees on is that the board should finish its mandate as soon as possible and return governance in full to the democratically elected officials. And to do that, we need to exit bankruptcy. So to the extent that, we are able to reach agreements and then those agreements aren't executed, that just keeps the board here longer. And I actually don't think that, any of the parties have that interest. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to convince them that we've done the best possible in terms of negotiating a sustainable agreement in each case, that it's as consensual as possible, and that it is the release that allows Puerto Rico to grow and to get rid of the board, which I think, again, everybody agrees on.
Next question, Aileen Brown from The Intercept.
Thank you. This is a question for Mr. Nixon. I'm curious, what role exactly did you play in Detroit's bankruptcy, and what lessons will you bring from that experience into this new role with the board?
That's a good question. The role I played in the Detroit bankruptcy was not a real active role. I mean, I was a state budget director at the time. I was part of the board that initially, before the law changed, oversaw the emergency manager or managed emergency manager in Detroit. That was primarily dealt with out of our local government section within the treasurer's office. But other than advising, the administration on certain matters with respect to, to the sound fiscal principles and so on and so forth. But I did not play an active role in the negotiations in Detroit. But I did learn a lot. And then obviously that was going on as I transitioned out of Michigan as well. The final bankruptcy deal was reached. The grand bargain was reached after I had left the state of Michigan. But, I learned that these are all very difficult scenarios, right? I mean, you've got people who have lent hard money to the state or the local government or the Commonwealth in this case. You have people who have worked their careers with their pensions. You've got people who are working for the government. They're all very difficult, very challenging decisions. But one thing that I learned is that you need to, in order to address an issue like this, everybody's got to be at the table and everybody's got to be willing to cooperate, to negotiate. Because what's happening right now is not in the best interest of anybody in Puerto Rico. The government's very unstable. You have citizens or residents of Puerto Rico, they're U.S. citizens, residents of Puerto Rico. You have those individuals who need a government to rely on. You need a stable government for economic activity. Businesses are not willing to relocate where there's instability in the government and in the regulation environment. And so you've got to really look at some of these structural issues to create a long-term sustainable environment. If you just nip around the edges and look at this as a budget exercise, we will miss the point. You actually have to look at those long-term structural issues to be able to create an environment where businesses can move to the Commonwealth, they can employ the residents of Puerto Rico, people can be successful, and you have the stability, and not just within the business environment, but in the education environment, the healthcare environment. And you've got to create an incentive for people to want. I mean, Puerto Rico is a beautiful place. I've been down there. My wife and I have been there on vacation. And at the end of the day, it's a beautiful place to visit. It's the people are great. And we need to do what's right, but also we need to, take a very balanced approach. And that's what we did in Detroit. You've got people who, the bondholders have a face as well. There are people who have invested in Puerto Rico. And so it's a balancing act that you've got to take very seriously. But, what I learned and what I hope to bring is have everybody roll up their sleeves, come to the table in a very cooperative manner to solve a very difficult problem.
All right. Since there are no more questions, thank you very much and have Merry Christmas.
Thanks, everybody.